Okay, so I would like to welcome everybody to our just after Hanukkah program. Unfortunately, because Hanukkah was so early this year and with scheduling problems, we're going to pretend that it's still Hanukkah because why not? Because we can. So I would like to first call on Marian just to give us a Devar Torah, please.
Okay. And Hanukkah can be all the year round. The message is still strong. We always have people that want our destruction, and we come through loud and clear, we light our Hanukkah candles and let them be bright for many, many years. The miracle of the discovery of a small amount of pure oil and is burning for 8 days is the focus of the Hanukkah celebration. It is therefore necessary to understand the importance of the symbolism of the olive oil that was yet untouched by Greek hands, and why, since events were already in the realm of the miraculous, was an amount of oil sufficient for 8 days and immediately provided by God. The answer is clear when we consider the nature of the Greeks of that time. The Greeks were not trying to kill all the Jews, as was Haman in the story of Purim, or later tyrants. They had in mind a more subtle kind of destruction that they aimed to stamp out the Jews' belief and faith in God by eliminating their study and observance of those of his commandments, such as circumcision, kashrut, and Shabbat, which were based more on faith than on human understanding. With Judaism reduced to a rational structure, they were certain that the Jews and their Torah would easily be assimilated into the dominant Greek culture and approach of life. This resistance as being stamped Greek at the cost of their traditional Jewishness is the reason why it is so important to find pure, untouched oil. With this small quantity of oil, the Jews could begin lighting the menorah, and from this, the light was sure to increase. The spiritual strength needed by the Jews was sure to be achieved neither by might nor by power, but by faith in God's Spirit. This is a message for all of us as we watch the Hanukkah flames increase in number and intensity night after night. The uncompromising faith of the tiny band of Maccabees, which was then miraculously rewarded by God, represents for us one of the secrets of Judaism that has come down through the generations to illuminate and guide us today. This is by Edith Rothman, may she rest in peace, Willamette, Illinois. And it brings us right to our program, which is about oil.
Yes, and I already did forget something from my notes. I just wanted to say in my welcome that lots of familiar faces here, but I want to welcome all the not so familiar faces to me that decided to come and join us this evening. So I guess we should get right to our program, yes? I would like to introduce Anna Urowitz-Freudenstein, who is currently a teacher at Chat in the Jewish Studies Department. And I'm going to hand the floor over to her so she can introduce our program, please.
Okay, hi everybody. Good evening. Happy day after Hanukkah. Thanks for joining us tonight to learn some new ideas and hopefully feel inspired, and also inspired in our minds and our hearts and in our tummies also, in anticipation of the yummy treat. So the way things are going to go this evening is that I'm going to introduce you to what I think will be a relatively new idea to most of you. If it's not brand new, then we'll get into it in more depth. So that'll be the new part. And then it's a theme that I'm introducing that we are then going to take into the kitchen and then I will hand things over to my mother, our chef. So I'm here for a little bit of historical and cultural context. And for those of you that have history, amazing, I've already got you on board. For those of you that think about, oh, history, that's so boring, I didn't like that in school, I'm going to ask you to please give us a chance, because first of all, yummy treats afterwards. But second of all, I think you're going to learn about a different part of history than you might have learned in Hebrew school, because we're going to be talking about a woman. And based on my experience, that based on my experience, there has not been a very big concentration on women in our curriculum of our schools, especially in Jewish studies. So we're going to meet one of them today. So with that, I'm going to go over to the share screen because I'm going to share a lot of information with you. Don't worry, there's no test. So you don't have to memorize anything or take any notes. But I find it easier that when I'm sharing this information, that if there's words or pictures up on the screen, that helps enhance the experience. So, and I think there will be time for questions at the end. So I don't think that we're doing that in the meantime. So I'm going over to share screen. Hopefully this will work. And here we go. So this is our title for tonight that was advertised. Milk and Honey, Tax and Taste, Dairy for Hanukkah. So we're going to get to the dairy, especially in the kitchen. But before we get to the dairy, I've got to explain to you why we're talking about it. We all know, of course, what the oil connection is to Hanukkah. We've heard a little bit of it in our Dvar Torah, and we know all the yummy treats that we make deep fried in oil over the last week. Some of us are maybe still feeling it, but I don't think that we all know about milk or milchex really in this case. So here we go. Let me try and teach it to you. So oil that we know about, milk, this is going to be our thing that we're going to learn about. In order to learn about it, we have to learn about a book called the Book of Judith. And that's all about my mom. No, just kidding. Her name's Judith also. But in this case, it's not about my mom. It's about an ancient heroine of the Jewish people. And some of you might have heard of her if you're interested in fine art or even in opera, because she's featured in some of those pieces of artwork. But we're going to go back and see where she comes from originally in history. In order to do that, we want to know where the Book of Judith is situated. And it's in a different kind of group of books, ancient Jewish books that are called the Apocrypha. In order to understand what the Apocrypha is, though, just as a little reminder about the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible. So not to worry about all the Hebrew on the screen, or yay, get excited about the Hebrew on the screen, depending on who you are. But what we have here is a breakdown, basically, of 24 books that are considered the Hebrew Bible. The Christians call it the Old Testament. We call it the Tanakh. And of course, you're all familiar with the 5 books of the Torah. Then we have the books of the prophets or the Nevi'im. You're familiar with a lot of them because, for instance, the Haftorah in Shul is from this corpus here. And then the Ketuvim. And you're familiar with a lot of those too because, for instance, Megillat Esther is in that group. The book of Psalms, where a lot of our prayers come from, is in that group. So this is the ancient Jewish canon. However, the Book of Judith is not in this canon. Rather, it comes from a group of books that was written by Jews but put together just not that long after the Tanakh was finished. That group of books has been collected by later scholars and thinkers into a group called the Apocrypha. Now, some of you might have heard that name before because if you've ever picked up or looked at one of those Christian Bibles that's generally that we used to go to hotels and there used to be a free Bible in the hotel. So it would have what they called the Old Testament, what they called the New Testament, the Christian Bible, and something called the Apocrypha, which kind of went in the middle. So it's not it's not sacred, it's not holy for Jews. However, as historians, we know that these were all originally Jewish texts. So they're really helpful for us to understand a little bit more of our own Jewish history. This is a list of the books of the Apocrypha that are considered holy by Roman Catholicism. Again, not holy for Jews, but history for Jews. So let's go ahead and learn about one of them, namely the second one here, the Book of Judith. Timely for this time period also, by the way, as you see down at the bottom, are the books of the Maccabees, where we learn so much of the history of the Maccabean period. So What is the Apocrypha? As I said, it's a collection of Jewish writings from the Second Temple period, but after the Tanakh was finished, before rabbinic literature started, like the Mishnah and the Talmud. There's time in between. And we have some historical records, some archaeological records from that time period, and we also have these books of the Apocrypha. The word Apocrypha is originally a Greek word, and it means hidden books. They were, after all, not exposed to all. They were special, again, not special enough to the Jews to call them holy, but still important histories. The versions that we have now sometimes have, that you might have in an English Bible you have at home, sometimes have later Christian editions that were added on over the years. But the original ones were Jewish. And so, as I said, it's really interesting and important for ancient Jewish history, and also considered holy by certain Christian groups, most famously, I guess, the Roman Catholics. All right, so the Book of Judith, what's it about? Well, it's about a woman named Judith, and she's a heroine of the story. Let's see what she had to do to become a heroine. It was a time when the Jews were in trouble, like a lot of the stories that we learn, and it says that Israel was invaded by a Persian king named Nebuchadnezzar. Now, there's no Persian king named Nebuchadnezzar. You might be familiar with the name of Nebuchadnezzar. He was a Babylonian king. So right here from the beginning, as well as other details that we're not going to concentrate on, that historians have determined that even though this comes from a very ancient time period in Judaism, we'll see from about the 2nd century, that the story it tells has so many weird aspects of it that couldn't possibly be true. So what we're reading is almost like an ancient novel. Okay, so it was written a really long time ago. It can explain to us how people were thinking in that time period, but it might not actually reflect a real happening in history. Okay, so the bad guy in this story's name is Holofernes, and he besieges a hilltop town called Betulia. It's in Israel, and that's Judith's hometown. They are under siege, the Jews in that town, and they decide they're just going to hold out for 5 days. They're not going to do anything, and they're going to wait and see if God will save them. If not, they're going to have to surrender. Judith will have none of that, and she wants to take action. She's a wealthy widow. She kind of knows what she wants. She takes the bull by the horn, and she says she doesn't agree with their plan of just waiting around and see what happens, but rather she is going to take action. Now, she also believes in God, though, and she prays to God for help. She makes herself physically beautiful, packs up some kosher food for the road, and leaves the city with her maid during the night in secrecy. She gets to the enemy camp, and the enemy commander is entranced by her beauty. He, in fact, tries to seduce her, but she won't have any of it. She has her own plans. She holds him at bay. After they have a lavish dinner, she waits until he's drunk with wine, and then when he's passed out from the wine, she kills him by cutting off his head. Some of you might be familiar with this idea from this very famous painting by, this one is by Caravaggio, French painter, Italian painter from 1600. This is also a great Italian painting from around the same time period. And this actually talks about the very next scene in the story where Judith enlists the help of her maid to take that head that they've already cut off, here's the sword, and head back home. So Judith and her maid take the head back to the Jewish town. They show it to the elders and say, don't worry, Judith was completely kosher and not defiled along the way. She used her beauty, but she didn't use it too far. And then they take that head and they hang it up on the outer walls of the town. So when the enemy troops finally come, they see the head of their leader, they panic, and then fall easy prey to Israelite troops. The Israelites are able to fight them off, and then the Israelites are saved. Yay, Judith has saved her people, is celebrated as a heroine, and she is not only a heroine because she is smart and used her beauty, but she is also still continues to believe in God, and God has helped her. So she thanks God in prayer, and she continues to live and be rewarded with a happy, peaceful life. There's our summary of the Book of Judith. And now you're saying, Anna, it's a nice story, but why are you telling it to me? There's no oil and there's no milk. I'm going to tell you you're right, and now we're going to try to have to make some more connections. So first of all, is Judith connected to Hanukkah? Again, we didn't see anything about the Maccabees. We didn't see anything about oil. Didn't see anything about the temple. Didn't see anything about any of that. Why are we even talking about her today? Well, we don't exactly know, but I'm going to give you some hypotheses. We do know that for a long time, hundreds of years at least, she has been explicitly connected to Hanukkah, even though Hanukkah is not in her story. This is actually a beautiful Hanukkah that is in the Israel Museum. I forget where, but anyway, this particular Hanukkah comes originally, I believe, from Poland about 300 years ago. Silver, and here we have Judith, and it's obviously related to Hanukkah. This is a Hanukkah. Here's her sword, and here is the head of Holofernes. Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. This is to show you actually where it's found at the Jewish Museum. I don't think we have time to look at that now, so we'll just go back to our slide. So we know that there has been a connection traditionally, and now we're going to try and figure it out. I'm saying we're going to try because scholars haven't actually found the missing link, but I'm going to give you as much information as I can. We know, for instance, talk about the timing of it. The Book of Judith, as I said, was composed about 100 BCE. Oh, I've made a mistake here. Okay, 100 BCE. And so this is, we're counting backwards in time because we're in the time before the year 0. The Hanukkah story happened about 64 years before it. So the writer of the Book of Judith knew the Hanukkah story. Interesting. Did any themes come out through it? Let's see. Oh, sorry, pressed the wrong button. You might say that Judith is the feminine form of the name Judah. Here we have a hero that saved their people, Judah. Hero that saved their people, Judith. In later medieval texts, some of which we're going to talk about, Judith actually finds her way into rabbinic stories, rabbinic texts, and in it she's more clearly connected to the time period of the revolt of the Maccabees. Again, in contradiction to the original story that we know from the Apocrypha, but nevertheless, that is the way the Jewish tale was told over the years. The other thing that is pointed out is there's an interesting parallelism between a beautiful woman who used her beauty in order to save her people, and there was a holiday that was from after the time of the Torah that was named for her. Well, I was actually talking about the Book of Esther, but you might also think about the Judith, if she was a beautiful woman who used her beauty to help save her people and celebrated in a holiday also not mentioned in the Torah, namely Hanukkah. So, told you about Judith, tried to make a connection to Hanukkah, but where does the cheese come in? Okay, so actually I made a mistake and I left out the word CE here. But first we have to do a little bit of time period to try to understand how this might have flowed. So in order to do this, I've constructed kind of like a timeline, not exactly. If you look here, we're trying to make a connection ultimately here between Judith, that I just told you about the story of Hanukkah, the story we're familiar with, and cheese in this particular case, Melchix. We called it milk in the beginning. It's really Melchix. It's really cheese. So let's try to trace it. We have 2nd century BCE actually here, so I'm sorry I left it out, where the Book of Judith was written. As I said, originally written by Jews, but then as far as we know, as far as the written record tells in Judaism, disappears from Jewish formal thought and literature. There is no mention of the Book of Judith or the story of Judith for another 1,100 years, more than 1,000 years. The Book of Judith and the story of Judith seems to disappear from the Jewish landscape. Not mentioned in the Talmud at all, for instance, or in any of the early Midrashim. So the story existed originally Jewish, not picked up as a Jewish holy book, but nevertheless Jewish, and then disappears from the scene for more than 1,000 years. And then about 1,000 years later, the story reappears or starts to reappear, first that we know of at least, in a religious poem written for Hanukkah, kind of extra prayers that were said for Hanukkah in synagogue. And this particular one talks about all the miracles, including a miracle performed by a woman named Judith for Hanukkah. This is the first connection that we see. Then about 100 years later, we have a very famous rabbi named Rashbam. He's a grandson of another very famous rabbi, Rashi. And he's the one that makes that connection with Purim. He says in a commentary to the Talmud, not the actual Talmud, just as the miracle of Purim came about through Esther, the miracle of Hanukkah came about through Judith. So here we have a very interesting correlation with Esther, which is very radical. Esther has a whole book about her in the Tanakh itself, in the Hebrew Bible itself, and Judith does not. And yet somehow she seems to be reintroduced here in the 11th century. Now we have to get about 200 years later until we have our first hint of this idea of Melvix, of cheese. And there we have one or two books, I've only mentioned one of them here, that talk about different customs in Judaism. And in that one, finally it's written down that it is the first connection of our Hanukkah heroine. Her name is Judith, and cheese is mentioned. Her story is changed in this story. It's first of all not given as much detail. It's just kind of an allusion to it. But the allusion says that she used cheese to make the bad guy thirsty, so thirsty he'd want to drink more and more and more wine so that he'd be totally passed out, which would make her task of beheading him even easier. So originally in the story, the ancient story, he just drinks a lot. Here in this story, she feeds him cheese in order to make him drink a lot so that she's able to behead him and ultimately become the hero of the story. And so starting in the 14th century, there's a recommendation for a food tradition based on it. And this is the first time that we see the recommendation that that you should eat cheese on Pesach. On Pesach. You should eat cheese on Hanukkah. It's a food tradition that apparently comes from the rabbi's version, which is different than the ancient one, of the story of Judith, where the bad guy doesn't just get drunk, she feeds him cheese to make him thirsty, to get him more drunk, so she can cut off his head. So that's really the end, except for I can't end it there, because we have another famous heroine in the Bible itself that does give milk to drink to a bad guy and then uses it to her advantage to kill him. And that is the book of Yael, which is part of the story of the prophetess Devorah in the book of Judges in the prophets section of the Tanakh. And there, the Israelites are also at war and also in danger. And in that particular story, there's another bad guy. This one's name is Sisera, and he's losing the battle. The Jews are winning, but they haven't totally won yet. And he runs away from battle. The head of the enemy army tries to escape. He goes to a tent of a woman who named Yael, who is not Jewish, but she is an ally of the Jews. The interesting thing, though, is that he thinks that she is an ally of his. Her husband kind of was friends with both sides. Anyway, she chose at this time to go with the Jews because she invites Sisera, bad guy, into her tent. He's exhausted from running from war and from fighting. He lies down and he asks for some water because he is thirsty. She instead gives him milk to drink. Here, I did it in white, actually. I'm sorry it doesn't show up. She gives him milk, and maybe this is the equivalent of whatever chemical body in milk that you give warm milk to people to fall asleep. Whatever it is, she gave him milk. He fell asleep. And it's at that point she did something else gruesome to his head. She didn't chop off his head, but she famously took the tent peg from her tent and put it through his temple and killed him that way, and helped her friends, the Jews, win the war. So we have another female heroine in this case who most definitely used milk to help bring down the bad guy. and she did something horrible to his head in order to make that happen. And there's a pretty good chance, although we have never been able to prove it as scholars, that somehow this story is lurking in the minds of the rabbis when they took that older Judith story, only line, and somehow adapted it or got a tradition hundreds of years later that it was cheese plus wine that made him tired enough to get his head chopped off. And so there's a chance that somehow this idea of milk being involved in a similar kind of lethal head injury for the enemy of the Jewish people somehow might have influenced the story of the rabbis. So I'm sorry to leave us off on such a gruesome note, but I will say, yay, female heroines of the Hanukkah story. And we can celebrate her, this female heroine, by raising a glass of milk. No, by enjoying the milchik delights that are going to be presented to us now as part of the continuation of this tradition to eat milchik foods in her honor. Mom, Rach?
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to just quickly speak for 1 second. Don't worry, the cooking demonstration is going to start right now. Just want to remind people, I know that Cora had actually told people in the chat, so that's wonderful. But if you want to put it onto speaker view, that would be the best, so that you'll be able to really see, or actually full screen even would be the best, so you can really see the presentation. I'm going to be filming my mom, who's going to be cooking, and I have a little bit of something to say at the very end. I did want to just say quickly, if for some reason there's a Wi-Fi that seems unstable on our side, we're pretty good now, but just in case, please don't go anywhere. It will be up and running moments after that, so please just be patient. I think we're okay though now, so let's hope. And without much further ado, let me introduce my mom, Judy Urowitz. I'm just going to switch our view here, and I think we can see Judy. Can everyone see Judy here? I believe so. And again, if you want to put Judy on full screen, that would be amazing. I'm just going to do that myself here as well too. And maybe, Cora, do you want to spotlight Judy, or maybe I'll do it? I think Cora's going to. Amazing. All right, whenever you're ready. Hello.
Hi there. Welcome to my kitchen. We're going to be doing some unusual recipes. When I was growing up, and also in my family, Hanukkah always was fried foods, oil, usually potato latkes. Later on, it was zucchini latkes, sweet potato latkes. Once we started to go to Israel, it was sufganiyot, Israeli jelly donuts. So this is what we were comfortable with. My mother made good potato latkes. My mother-in-law made fantastic potato latkes. She had a secret ingredient. I don't know what it was exactly, but keep it white. I think it was
Love, maybe. Let me love.
Ascorbic acid to keep it nice and white. And they never turned black, even though they were sometimes 2 days old, they were never dark. So today, I'm going to introduce you to an Italian custom. When I was thinking about what was I going to do for this dairy kind of treat to serve on Hanukkah, certainly wasn't going to make blintzes, that's for Shavuot, or cheesecake. So I had to come up with a new idea. And I was searching around on the web and came across these Italian cheese pancakes or cheese latkes. So I'm going to be demonstrating 2 different recipes today. I think you may have gotten the recipes in advance. One of them is savory and one of them is sweet. And then I'm going to put my own twist on it afterwards, where I'm going to put some unusual toppings, contemporary toppings. So I'm going to start by making the savory recipe. It's pretty easy. Both these recipes are pretty easy. So the first recipe calls for pressed cheese. You know what that is. You use it in blintzes or in cheesecake. This is a different brand that I usually use. I usually use Westerns, but I couldn't find it. So this is Lahadrin, and I'm going to mix that up. Mix that up with some feta cheese. Just throw that in the sink. Some feta cheese. crumbled.
So with the water, I see too.
Yeah, I drained it, but I added some more water because it was a little thick. 4 eggs.
Already checked for kashrut, I'm sure.
Already checked for kashrut earlier. There we go. 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. And we're gonna mix that up. I did add a little extra milk. It was in the bottom of the bowl because before, when I was experimenting with the recipe, I found it difficult to mix. It was a little too thick. And maybe because that pressed cheese had a lower fat content.
Mixes up pretty nicely there. Should you recommend a wooden spoon? What do you recommend?
Well, if I had a dairy food processor, I would have put it in the food processor, but unfortunately I don't have a dairy food processor. So I'm just using a wooden spoon,
Old fashioned, that's good.
old fashioned, and it whips up really kind of easy. You just got to use some arm muscles here. And I have my griddle next to me, heating up now. I think it's probably hot enough. I am going to use some oil on it.
If someone doesn't have a griddle, could they just use a frying pan?
Frying pan is fine. I'm using the griddle because I wanted to be here on the island. I didn't want to go over to the stove. Easier for family. So I think that's probably good enough. Few lumps will make the texture interesting.
Hold it up towards the camera. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
And I'm just going to ladle some latkes out on the grill, on the cooktop here.
It's nice and hot, I
I
see.
probably should have put a little more oil on here. I have an idea.
So it was pre-greased, but maybe because it was all,
pre-greased, but you know, it's Hanukkah, so
the more the
the
merrier.
more the merrier. I'm just gonna put some little bit of oil on here. And I'll take a paper towel and wrap it around. Use my back.
Judy, did you say you added sugar to that recipe?
No, not to this recipe. This is the savory one.
So stay tuned for the sweet one.
And I'll take my spatula and just flatten it out a bit.
It's very soft.
I'm just going to fry this one because it's not interesting for you to watch these frying onions. And then I'll show you what they look like because I made some earlier. I'll put a couple on here.
Did anyone already have a chance to try the recipes? I know that they were published earlier. I think someone said they had a chance. She did?
Mhm. She made them.
So I have the ingredients. So I think I'm gonna try it. Yeah, that's so
I think
good.
they'd be great. For Hanukkah is nice, but they also look
Yeah.
delicious. It's a nice time of the year.
Black fat cheese, these are delicious. So just flatten them out so they cook. And just like pancakes, you have to wait till the other side is completely cooked before you flip them, otherwise you're gonna make a big mess.
And I think you could actually develop a new Shavuot tradition even here with
Oh,
the
yeah.
dairy. So who knows, you could use it for Judith and remember the dairy, or Shavuot in June, we can eat them then too.
There we go. Beautiful. Oh,
Nice.
no, too
No,
dark.
I think it looks
Fine.
great. That's
That one's
beautiful.
perfect. Okay, so this is what they look like finished.
The magic of the camera. Ah,
Voila.
beautiful.
And later on, I'm going to dress them up.
So do they rise a little bit when you're cooking them? They
No,
do.
because
Oh,
there's no baking
there's no
soda,
right.
there's no leavening agent other than the eggs.
Just the egg. So, but it
Yeah.
gets smushed down.
I flatten them out.
And you can make them as big as you want. I wonder if you can make it like a crepe, very big.
Hard to handle. You can make little ones like a silver dollar, and then you could use them as hors d'oeuvres.
That'd be nice, like a blini kind of.
Exactly.
Put some caviar on it too. Nice. Here, there's what they look like. Beautiful.
They look like pancakes, but they don't taste like pancakes. They're savory.
They hold their shape pretty nicely.
Okay, now I'm going to get on with the next recipe, which is even simpler than this one.
I'll focus in on these sizzling pancakes.
Oh my, it's too hot.
Oh, I like them like that. Gives it a bit of a crispy edge.
Let me lower the temperature again.
That's nice. Does anyone else like the crispy cheese? That's my favorite.
Melted. Okay, the next recipe, hope you have it. It's made with ricotta cheese. Let me get this out of the way.
Oops.
These eggs I didn't break, so we'll be breaking them now.
So again, these recipes I think are going to be available if not already. So you don't need to write anything down. Just take that one off, yeah. Perfect.
Just lower the temperature a bit. Oh,
There's one right behind. Here, why don't I get you another one?
oh, here it is. I've got it. Okay. So we'll put the eggs in one at a time.
How many eggs is it?
This recipe is 3 eggs.
Just
The
gonna
other one had 4.
just move this out of the way. Do you have a type of ricotta cheese you prefer?
Anything that I can find that's kosher. There aren't too many brands. This brand is kosher.
The Saputo one. It's good, that one. It's nice. Is it a smooth ricotta?
This
Is it
one
a,
is smooth.
okay.
As a matter of fact, it looks almost a little too liquidy.
And we can always drain it.
I'll mix it up. So this is a cup.
So mix it right into the eggs.
Put into the eggs. This one calls for baking powder. I believe it's a teaspoon. I just better check and see. Teaspoon, I don't remember. 1 teaspoon. Okay. Baking powder.
Oops, sorry about that. I moved too quickly with the camera.
The recipe that I sent you didn't have sugar in it. And after I experimented with them, I found that they needed a little sugar. So I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar.
So that was a teaspoon of the
Baking
baking powder.
powder. And a tablespoon of sugar. And I'm also going to add some lemon zest.
Mhm.
So I washed this lemon earlier. I think they're putting wax on lemons nowadays. It's very different. And I'm just going to zest in, maybe about a teaspoon of lemon zest.
That looks good. Could you use other things? Like you could use orange.
You could use orange, you could use really cinnamon, you could put in there any kind of flavor.
So you could take it back
But
to
the traditional
succulent.
one was with lemon.
Yeah.
Okay, and in this case, I'm actually going to use my immersion blender. I'll give that to Rachel over there. I'm going to use my immersion blender to blend it up rather than a spoon.
You can use the spoon, but that'll be a lot.
This is a much thinner batter. Almost crepe like.
Nice.
I'm going to ladle them onto the. Let me use that. Thank you. Oh, it's much thinner than it was this afternoon. I made it this afternoon, probably because I should have drained the ricotta cheese. Hopefully it'll work.
Actually, this can really be like a crepe then.
Yeah, very thin
That's nice. It'll rise though, so
because it has the baking powder.
yeah, that's good. That's a perfect circle. That's nice. So would you serve these as a dessert, as a snack? What would you recommend?
Okay, this particular one, the sweet one, would be as a dessert, and you'll see why.
I ask a quick question.
Yes.
You were just saying, I just heard you say about draining the ricotta.
Yeah, earlier when I used it, when I first opened the package, it was solid. I had made them earlier in the day to try them out to see how they'd work. And with the ricotta cheese sitting, I think the water separated, the whey separated from the curds. And I probably should have drained it because it's quite thin.
So you could drain it either just by pouring it off, or if you have a cheesecloth, you could put it in if you really wanted to get rid of it. But usually you could pour it off, right? But it
Okay,
doesn't seem
thank
to-
you.
It doesn't seem to have impacted it too much here because it's
Spread
spread.
just a little thinner. You'll see
Yeah.
the ones that I did earlier in the day. Well, I'll show them to you now.
Thanks.
Here they are. You'll see they're a little, they have a little bit of thickness to them, and these are going to be quite thin. You see those?
Yeah.
So
I'll
this
hold
is-
them here so people can see.
So these I would serve as a dessert. And I'm going to give you a couple ideas what to do with them. I'm going to leave those because I think they're a little too thin.
So we'll use these ones then, because that's the magic of what you see on a cooking show usually.
Magic of television. Okay, so you can serve them very simply by just putting some icing sugar. Just putting some icing sugar over them like this. Now the recipe that I saw, the Italian recipe, the authentic recipe, what they did is they whipped cream and they put limoncello, which is Italian liqueur made from lemons. Italian
Rinds of
lemons.
lemon, yeah, that would be amazing.
And this is a kosher one that you can only buy around Pesach time. It's hard to find. I haven't seen it in the LCBO recently. We got it at Pesach. So limoncello in whipped cream, and then that's how they serve it, and they stack them up with real whipped cream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this kind of whipped cream.
That makes it easier.
Because I didn't want to, can you open this for me?
I will.
My sous chef.
Here we go.
And I'm just going to put some whipped cream on them and some blueberry. Oh, I think I'll use some lemon curd. Now I was able to find this lemon curd made by E.B. Smith, which has a hechsher on it, a core. I hadn't seen it before.
Let's see the half side.
It's just core.
Yeah, there you go, so people can see. Perfect.
E.B. Smith, and put a dollop of the lemon curd. You can make your own lemon curd, which would be much better.
I've tasted hers before. It's delicious. She's made
But I
it.
was being lazy today and I bought it.
But it's good because it shows other people they don't have to make it from scratch.
And a few blueberries. And then you have a very nice, simple dessert.
That looks amazing. Is that my dessert tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
The other thing you can do, another treatment, is you can take the latke, cheese latke, and I cooked up some pears. I just poached some pears.
That looks nice. What did you poach them in?
Just water and a little sugar.
Is it? Do you have a cinnamon stick in there? I see something. No.
What I have in there is some candied ginger.
Oh, that's what looks so nice.
Candied ginger and some cranberries. So it's kind of seasonal.
That would be
Fall-like.
beautiful dessert then. And then there's the liquid there too. That's nice.
And you could use really any kind of fruit, apples, but I thought pears would be a little different. And where's that sugar? Disappeared.
Here it is. There it is.
There we go.
So just to finish it, that's nice. Those are nice plates too.
There we go.
Let's see, hold up number 2. That's pretty great. And now the question is, what do I prefer? Which one? That's hard. I'll taste that right now.
Okay. I just bring over the lemon one.
Yep.
I just want to put a little lemon curl on the top to make it fancier. Make it look professional.
Let's show that here. So it's a very high impact dessert then for, it looks like not such a high impact amount of time and prep, which is what you want. That's great.
Correct. Okay, now what I'm going to do with the cheese ones
Here they are.
This would be very nice luncheon treat, a meal. Or if they were small, they could serve as hors d'oeuvres. And what I'm going to do with this, put it out of the fridge, excuse me.
I like that there's different ways that you can use these pancakes. So you can make, now could you make up a batch and freeze them?
Yes, of course. I would put parchment paper between.
So you can, when you're making it, you don't have to worry about waste. You just make a whole bunch and then whenever your guests coming over, you're good to go. Or a fancy lunch for yourself.
So basically it's like, well, you would do the same thing with a crepe. So I mixed up some cream cheese, thinned it out with a little milk. And I'm going to put some cream cheese on here.
Just like your L. Okay, I think it's the story
And
we learned
a
about.
piece of lox. Or more than a piece of lox.
Depends on your,
And on the size of your crepe.
or how much you like it.
How much you like it, correct. Let's put a kind of generous piece on here. And we'll put some capers. A couple of capers if you like capers. And a little sprinkle of dill.
And if it's seasonal, you can get some fresh dill if you have some.
I dry my own.
She does, it's delicious.
There you go.
Let's see.
So that would be a very nice first course, or if it was larger, it would be, you know, lunch.
Or nice on a brunch table as well,
Brunch table as
right?
well.
That would be
And you could
amazing.
do it as a bar. You could put the individual stuff. You could have the lox separate, the cream cheese separate, then the pancake or the latkes separate, and people could put on what they want.
That's a great idea. So instead of an omelet bar, you could do these
Correct.
instead. Okay, that looks
Now,
delicious.
everybody seems to be eating avocado toast. Seems to be a very
It's
trendy
very
thing
hot
in
right
all
now.
restaurants.
And healthy.
So that's my addition is mashed avocado. Make sure to get them ripe or buy them a few days in advance so that they are ripe. Just mash it up.
Nice.
Put a squirt of lemon without the pit.
Get these out of the way.
And then take the other plate. Put the cheese pancake on, the cheese latke on.
The savory one, of course.
Everyone. Spread the avocado on it. We charge you, I don't know, $14.98 for this in a restaurant.
That's true.
And a poached egg on top,
Oh, that takes it.
or a sunny side up egg.
That's nice.
I hope I can get this out of the poach this earlier, like that.
That's beautiful looking. If you like a poached egg, that's gorgeous.
There you go.
Put some flaky salt on that. And there you go. Take a look, everyone. Let's see.
We have a question. There's a question in the chat around how long the pancakes are supposed to cook for, the cheese latkes, how long they're
They're
supposed to cook.
until they're done. And this one, as I said, these here are not, are
Oh, we
too
were-
thin. These were a failure.
Those actually would have been fine,
This
but we
one's
we turned
okay.
away from them. But really, you had the other ones were on for less than a minute
Less
before
than
you
a
flip
minute.
each side. So you flip them.
You flip them. Once the one side is brown, then you flip them over.
So it's like when you get the
If can
bubbles.
You can get your spatula underneath it like that, move it around. It's ready to be flipped.
So when you see something like bubbles, like a
Yeah,
pancake,
like a
right?
pancake.
Like regular pancakes.
So I would say, I don't know, what would you say, Rachel?
I'd say about a minute, just maybe no more than a minute each side, and take your lead from how thick it is. If it's thinner, it'll be less than that.
And that's what I have to present to you
Uh,
about dairy for Hanukkah.
I love it that these are very simple recipes, it seems, but yet they look, and let me just show you again. So you had I'll start with the savory ones, but you had the option of the one with lox and cream cheese with the dill and capers, which looks amazing. This is going to be yummy to eat afterwards. The avocado toast, the trendy one here, which is amazing. And you could put a garnish if you want on top of that. Then you also have the poached pear
Or apples.
with, this is the seasonal one with the cranberries and the ginger. It's like a gingerbread, kind of spiced one. And then this one, which looks summery as well. This is gorgeous for Shavuot. This would be beautiful because it's so summery looking.
Agree.
With the blueberries and the curd, homemade or jarred, with the delicious, you could use, here you've got whipped cream, but you could use creme fraiche or something, right?
Yogurt.
Yogurt, Greek yogurt, if you want something a little healthier. And then the lemon, with a lemon swirl. That's beautiful. That's great, thanks,
I
Judy.
think Rachel wants to say something about Italian jewelry. seeing
Where's
as we were
Rachel?
talking.
Let's see where she is. All right, I'm going to turn it around, guys. Thanks very much. Amazing, it's magic. Here I am, everyone. Hi, how are you doing? That was great. Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate learning all that stuff. And I'm so lucky because I get to eat that stuff now. And I'm also lucky because I get to eat my mom's delicious food all the time. So when we're here for Shabbat dinner and other holidays and other really special days, I am amazingly happy and always walk away with a full belly, that's for sure, and a smile on my face. So I'm going to end today by specifically talking about the Jews of Italy, because today's theme was about Italian Jewish food. And although Anna's introduction was not specifically about Italians and Italian Jewry, because these specific recipes are, I think it's important just to wrap that up. And the Italian Jewish community has a very amazing history. It's a long history. It's a history of a Jewish community that we know goes back as early, tying it into Hanukkah, with even the time of the Maccabean revolt. And we are aware from different sources that there were convoys and envoys that went to Rome from Judea, that went there in order to make friendship and in order to try to find alliances with some of these Maccabean princes that later on became kings of the region. And in particular, we know that would be, well, first of all, that's the 2nd century BCE. And it tells us, even from the book of Josephus, that the Romans early on treated the Jews with a certain amount of special, gave them special perks. In particular, it tells us that Hyrcanus, who was one of these Hasmonean princes, was given special promises that the Jews would not have to serve in the Roman armies. We already knew they'd been given permission not to serve in the Greek armies under Alexander the Great, but they were also told that they wouldn't have to do this. They wouldn't have to bear arms. And the reason was, and it tells us, which I find very amazing, is that the Romans seemed to be aware that the Jews could not eat their food in the army, that they could not bear arms. It says also on the Sabbath, Josephus tells us, and it also tells us that they had customs that were unique to them. So from the 2nd century BC, we know the Romans, the Greeks earlier, but the Romans knew of this. And not only that, but it says that the early Romans recognized this in the Jews, respected this in the Jews, and gave us promises that we wouldn't have to do these types of things that would break our traditions. So that's going back to the 2nd century BCE. So that's 2,200 years ago. Going further a little bit more, we know that a larger number of Jews end up in Rome after the destruction of the Second Temple. That happened in the year 70 of the Common Era. And when that happens, a lot of Jews are being brought as slaves. You guys might be aware of this. If you've been to Rome, you've seen the Arch of Titus, and you've seen walking under the arch, these very spectacular images of Jewish slaves being brought out into the city of Rome, carrying the loot from the destroyed temple, the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. You see the menorah, you see these special horns, you see certain standards that are being carried by the Roman soldiers. And the Jews are being bound, their hands are behind their back, and they're led through the city where people can jeer at them. So Jews were let out as slaves as part of the loot and part of the victory parades that the Romans celebrated. But we always think about the fact that their lives must have been so terrible, but in reality they weren't, because shortly afterwards, they were freed from slavery there. And they were allowed to live quite well in Rome. And Josephus tells us that there were many synagogues in Rome. Now, what a synagogue was back then, I don't want us to think about like Beth David today or Beth Tikva today or other synagogues like that. They were probably meeting places which are called voluntary associations or collegia. And these voluntary associations are specifically talked about. And we know them from not only Jewish source Josephus, but also from a Latin source, Cicero. And this is what it says. It tells us that the synagogues were viewed as these collegia, or these kind of Roman associations. And it says that Julius Caesar and also Caesar Augustus, so Julius Caesar in the 1st century BC, and Augustus from the end of the 1st century BC into the 1st century of the Common Era, gave certain special abilities for Jews to practice. The Senate prohibited other collegia, or voluntary associations, on the principle of the fact that they believed that these private institutions were dangerous to the state. Who knows what they were doing? Maybe they were, causing or planning rebellion. A lot of them were seen as dangerous. And it was very characteristics of the political and social turbulence of the period to be wary of some of these voluntary associations. But what it tells us is that even though Julius Caesar prohibited all of these other collegia, it says Judaism was the exception in the empire. So we know in the 1st century BC into the 1st century CE, and from many different sources, Jewish and non-Jewish sources, that Jews could practice. Jews were given special status, and Jews themselves were, we know, even demonstrated at the funeral of Caesar, according to Cicero, that they were given even a special, almost like a berth to watch the funeral procession. So there was a special relationship. Now, it wasn't always that way, but we know between the 800s and the 1300s, if we fast forward, there were approximately 20,000 Jews that were living, and a lot of the Jews at that time were in the southern part of Italy. So that would include Rome, and then going south from Rome, in Apulia and Sardinia and Sicily, you see a lot of Jewish communities flourishing there. And if you've been to Italy, you might have visited some of those communities. There are some stories that say the Jewish community there reached up to 100,000. That is certainly not true. It's certainly wishful thinking. But what it's trying to show us is that they were known as a minority, but they were a minority that people knew of and had really entrenched themselves into Roman society, into Latin society, Roman society, Italian society. What did they do there? Most of the Jews were involved in textiles, in silk industry. Many of them were artisans. Many of them were weavers. They were silversmiths, blacksmiths. And also they became very involved in the culinary traditions of the time. And I'm going to share that with you in a second, just to tie it back into today. Now, Jews, typically wherever we are impacted by other peoples and other cultures that we live amongst, because we're a minority group. And so typically we take a lot from the cultures that we live around and we use them for our own and give them a little twist. So there had been a lot of Arab presence in southern Italy between the 800s and the 1300s. And we know that it's during that time that certain fruits and vegetables and spices became very popular that Jews adopted. So this includes things like raisins and things like vinegars. And we know that also pine nuts. And if you've ever cooked there's a very, very famous Roman and Italian recipes for fish. My mom makes it often, actually, which has pine nuts and white raisins on it. And this is, we always think of it as Italian, but it really came from Arab traditions that was then incorporated in, and they gave it a special spin. Some of the other Arab influences that we know of are rice. Eggplant was being brought in at this time, things that we see so much. Sicilian eggplant, you think of that as such an Italian vegetable that's used, but really it was brought in by the Arab presence, as well as artichokes and specific spices. So what we thought was Italian indigenous cooking really was not. It was brought in by many settlers, and of course then it was used by each community in their own way. Now, difficult times arrived for the Jews in around the 13th century. And at that time, and shortly afterwards into the 1500s, when the Venice ghetto opens, we see that Jews are going to be segregated. And ghettos persisted in Italy really until about the 1800s, until Napoleon's period. They weren't always as large as they had been, but the Venice ghetto is the first ghetto, and it's the most famous ghetto. And even though they were so poor living in these ghettos, we know that there was a culinary tradition that began to flourish there, using what they could, taking some of those outside influences, and of course, making them part of their own Jewish society and culture, and really blossoming these new food styles and tastes. So that gives you a little bit background on where some of these tastes come from. But I wanted to tell you one last thing, and it's short until I end, but there are 3 different groups of Jews that are typically categorized in Italy. You have the Italkim, which are the Italians that trace their roots back to those early community I told you about, who came even from the time of the Maccabees maybe, and shortly afterwards, and certainly those who were enslaved by the Romans. So those are the earliest. Some of them go back and can trace their roots in the country for 2,000 years, which is amazing. Then there's the Sephardim, and the Sephardi Jews came to Italy, we know, after the Spanish Inquisition, Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions, starting in 1492. And at that time, they brought with them from Spain. And remember, Spain had people from the New World in the 1400s. Columbus came to the New World, as did other explorers. And so they'd been introduced to things like tomatoes and pumpkins and potatoes and corn, all things that came from the New World, our world, that were brought back. So you think a tomato is such an Italian taste, but it actually was introduced by some of these Spanish settlers and others, I mean, not only Jews, but other Spanish settlers who came in at that time and shared the New World find with them. So I found that to be so interesting. And pumpkin, I don't know if I mentioned, but pumpkin as well too was brought in, and it's used in a lot of Italian restaurant recipes even today. Then there is also the Ashkenazim. And the Ashkenazim came from Central Europe as early as the 14th century. They're the smallest of the three groups of the Italkim, the Sephardim, and then the Ashkenazim. And those Ashkenazi Jews, who primarily came from Germany and France, settled in areas like Ferraro, Piedmont, Friuli, Trieste, and other places more towards the north. So where you had the original Jews who settled south, these ones went more north. And because of that, their diet was different because, of course, what was locally grown, that's all they had then. So these three groups existed simultaneously. How do we know that? I always, as someone who likes to look for proofs, how can we corroborate that? In the Venice ghetto, where all three of these groups, the Italkim, the Sephardim, and the Ashkenazim, lived simultaneously together, there were special schools, skole, and these schools, or skole, were named for these groups that still you can find. And if you take a tour of the Venice ghetto today, you'll be able to see these schools, or skole. And in the Venice ghetto, there was the Skole Tedesca, and also the Canton one, which was for the Ashkenazim. Then there was also the Scuola Spagnola, which was for the Sephardim, the Spanish one, and the Scuola Italiana, which was for the Italkim, those who were more indigenous. They weren't really indigenous, but seemed more indigenous to the region. Today, some of the communities in Italy, or the largest two, are in Rome and in Milan. So if you're looking to go and visit communities, you'll find the largest there, but certainly you can find synagogues. You look at Florence, for example, a beautiful synagogue there, all over the country from north to south. The food that you're going to eat when you go to these Jewish places is not purely Italian necessarily, but it's really a product of a migrant cuisine, because really Italy had people settling there, either forcibly settling or because they chose to escape from persecution elsewhere. So it's a migrant cuisine that embodies a culinary assimilation, acculturation and assimilation, both that is written down in recipe form and passed on through family secrets, and also through oral traditions that are passed on from mother to daughter. And I think it's a beautiful culture, and we should all learn more about it.
About the artichoke, the Jewish artichoke.
Well, one of the famous recipes is a Jewish artichoke, which is fried flat. So you push it down and you fry it flat, and it's very famous. And if you go today into the Jewish area in Rome, you can order this. It's delicious. It's really, really crispy. And the heart is soft, so it's very nice. And that, interestingly enough, though, you think of it as such an Italian delicacy, Jewish Italian delicacy, but it was really brought in by those Arab settlers who came in. So it's something you learn about, that we kind of take for granted, certain culinary treats and tastes. But when you look at it and do culinary history, you see that nothing hasn't already been, as I said, kind of colored with other flavors and influenced by other cultures that have been living in many of these European cities, especially in Italy, over the last 2,000 years. So that's a great thing to think about next time you bite into one of these delicacies. And as well, today there's about 45,000 Jews living in Italy. So I recommend, as soon as we can get on a plane, let's go there and let's take a trip and a tour of culinary Italy. That would be amazing. Mom, what do you think? Would you like to come and eat some cheese latkes while you're there? These ricotta cheese latkes, and think of the Italian history and roots. So Mom, come on over here as well too. This was a lot of fun for us because we got to do myself, my mom, and my sister Anna, which is unusual, and it's great.
We should take it on the road.
We should take it on the road. Exactly. Any questions? We'd love to take questions. I see there are some in the chat room, so let me just quickly take a look. Anna's on as well too. Let's see here. Thank you for those who enjoyed it. The synagogue in Rome is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. The one in Florence is magnificent. As an archaeologist, I can tell you there are some beautiful ancient remains of, even near Arezzo, there was a 1st century synagogue, which has just been excavated a little bit. And if you have a chance to go to Tuscany, you can see it there. It's pretty amazing.
We missed it when we went.
So we missed it, unfortunately, when we went as a family. It was a lot of fun. Okay, so let's see here. So it looks a nice, tasty change from a potato latke. I agree. I'm not a big fan of potato latkes, but these ones look great. Thanks to everyone. Okay, let's see. Anything else?
Let you know.
Yeah. Any question? Who is that? Any other questions?
Can I just ask one out loud? The use of the ladle, I've never seen anybody use a ladle. Or the
Oh,
other
yeah.
spoon, what was the small spoon? It looked like a coffee thing
It's
that you
actually-
do.
It's another ladle.
No, it was this one. She actually used a measuring cup.
Oh, a
she used-
measuring
She used the
cup.
half
Oh.
cup. And it's something my mom has taught me. I use them often. There's a lot easier sometimes than finding a big clunky ladle in the drawer. So I've seen my mom use it often, and she did today. Today was the half cup, but it's great because for things like this, the measurement, you know exactly what it is. And we all have these in our drawers anyways, so you don't necessarily need another
Terrific.
ladle.
You know, normally we just take a spoon and throw some in, but that would be more
No, the
measured.
ladle-
I think that's a great idea.
It's a lot tidier.
It's a lot tighter. And you can find some of these that actually even have a little
Yeah.
pour spout, which
Yeah.
makes it easy as well. Okay, let's see. What is I see Tina has said something here. Let's see. Tina. Oh, sorry. It says Tina said it's a little bit hard for you people to hear my mom. So let's see. It should be on the microphone, but we'll speak a little louder. We'll speak louder. So what we were saying, Tina, in case people couldn't hear, was that we use often in the house, must just be a family thing, measuring cups for small ladles. That's what we were sharing.
We even use them for soup sometimes.
Yes, and burn ourselves, but they are good as well. So you have meat ones for chicken soup, and don't burn your fingers. We've done that, but it works. It works. Any other questions on anything, whether it be on Anna's presentation, on the Italian Jews, anyone here who's been to Italy to visit some of these sites? I mean,
The
really,
Jewish ghetto.
the Jewish ghetto in Rome, certainly in Venice, where you can go as well too. And you can take wonderful tours. You know, when you're in Italy, don't just go and visit the Vatican, which is, of course, everyone should go and visit these beautiful sites in the Roman Fora, which are fabulous, but go and visit the Jewish sites as well.
There's
And
great kosher restaurants.
yes, there are really good ones. And eat that artichoke as well.
In the Jewish style.
Anyone have anything else for us? This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yes, Anna? A lot of fun for us. It's great because I get to be here with my mom, which is very nice. I was filming, but she was making some delicious treats.
That's right. And we also, we wish the best of luck to our old congregation, Beth David, with our old congregation, Beth Tikva. Both our families have very strong roots and very wonderful memories of both the shuls, and we only wish you the most success.
Oh, Annie, your bat mitzvah was at Beth David.
And mine at
Yes.
Tikva. So there you go. So there you go. That's kind of nice. And I see that
Would
someone
you
asked,
put- What would you put on a potato latke other than sour cream or
Apples,
applesauce?
poached
What
apples,
else
but
would you-
you could try these poached pears.
yeah. This was not just poached pears, they were poached pears with candied ginger. So that made it really special. She made
Candied
that.
ginger and some cranberries.
I
Oh,
love
cranberry sauce is good.
Yeah.
Cranberry sauce is good on potato latkes.
it. So you can make
Okay,
extra.
thank you so much.
Get creative though. The great thing is it's a blank canvas, right? So if you have one of these things, you know, it's this pancake, don't just kind of get stuck with sour cream and applesauce. Go for it and see what's in your pantry or whatever's left
Mashed
over.
avocado.
Mashed avocado. Who would have thought avocado toast on a latke? Can I share what my mom made on
Oh,
Friday?
yeah, that's a latke. Wow.
But why not, right? I'll share what my mom did on Friday night for Shabbat dinner for all of us. She actually took a piece of schnitzel and took 2 latkes and coated the latke around the piece of schnitzel. So we had schnitzel latke.
No, it was raw
Raw batter. It was even more so. She took the raw latke batter and instead of using breadcrumbs, she encased the piece of turkey or chicken breast in it. And it was pretty delicious. So when you cut into it, you saw latke,
Pretty
turkey,
oily.
latke, very oily, but it was worth
By
it.
the way, we talk about food all the time, in case you couldn't guess from how this conversation's going. At every meal, we're planning the next meal and we're reminiscing about the food.
Well, look at that's the Jewish way. We go from one holiday to the next.
Yes.
And
Do it
now
again.
look at you're a
Oh,
year ahead.
Sarah's putting in messages. The other sister doesn't want to feel left out. If you check the messages, she's giving some extra tips for you. Check the chat from Sarah.
What you said is to put some meat pulled brisket, she said, on one of the latkes.
Oh,
That would be something.
delicious.
Some pulled brisket. You could put corned beef or corned beef hash would be nice on it with some mustard. Lots of great
Leftover
things.
corned beef.
Leftover corned beef. I don't, in my house, there wouldn't be leftover. Okay, so anyways, we can chat like this all the time. As you can see, we always have a lot to say, but we thank you so much for inviting us today. It's been a lot of fun for all of us. And I love presenting through the sisterhood and the brotherhood at Beth David. So I'm so happy that I'm here now with my mom and my sister as well. And thanks to everyone for having us and for
Very nice.
my mom welcoming us into her home. So
Into my kitchen.
into her kitchen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that Tina is going to give a formal thank you.
Thank you.
Tina, if you'd like to
Oh.
go ahead.
Rachel, Judy, Anna, and Sarah, I don't want you to feel left out. I want to thank you all for sharing tonight with us. It was very enjoyable, very informative, educational. I've learned a lot of things. I always thought Hanukkah was for latkes. I'm sure going to try these cheese latkes because they look delicious. And I know, Judy, that you're the best cook. So I'm waiting to get the leftovers, not change it. It's
Come
coming.
by.
Thank you all very much. And it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us,
you, everyone.
everybody. And that was great. I'm so hungry now for cheese latkes.
Me
Really
too, and I get to
great.
eat them. so
Rachel's
that's-
going to eat one right
I'm
now.
having my